Leaving. When I was 18 and away from my town, I dived recklessly and surely into the world, not because it was a form of rebellion, as people might think, but as a form of healing and survival. Mama and Daddy wanted me to be a school teacher, a job that guaranteed an income and the best employment Appleton County offered, but I had my heart set on literature. Faulkner and Styron and Warren, I felt, had saved me, and I wanted a life constructed of books. You can write in the summers, Daddy said. I chose to attend North Georgia College, a small military school in Dahlonega, a mountain town that had suffered a gold rush in the mid-1800s, producing enough ore to gild the dome of the state capitol and make a semi-tourist attraction of the place. The town is located on the edge of the Chattahoochee National Forest, foothills of the Appalachians, where fall torched the mountainsides to gold, orange, and red. Real snow fell, and clear streams sloshed through their rocky beds and emptied into fast, boulder-strewn rivers, the Chattooga, the Jacks, and Nantahala. Dahlonega was built around a square where the courthouse stands, with old wooden storefronts surrounding it, a potter's shop, an ice cream restaurant, a real estate office, a health food store. The town was supported by the college and by fall tourists who came to see the leaves. I chose North Georgia because my sister had gone there and because scholarships paid my way. I was there 2 years, and it was a stepping stone into myself. I lived in a red brick, ivy-covered dorm in a pinched room with metal furniture. My roommate, a self-confident redhead from Atlanta, spent more time with her boyfriend than studying. Men were not allowed on the halls, and many nights she did not come home. When she did, she slept in. I was up early, by 6, when revelry sounded and the thud of marching feet marked time to the platoon's chants. We're the men from Alpha Corps. We don't like girls no more. Before dawn, the senior officers were out running the frogs or freshmen. Military was optional for women, most of whom opted out, but mandatory for men. Except for the brutal hazing and grueling demands placed on frogs, I felt like one of them, tortured by my lack of experience and my newness. So many things I had never done, and now I was on my own. I could choose for myself an enormous responsibility. I had not dated, nor experienced much of social life. I had not played sports. I had not been to a movie or to a bar or dancing. Finally, if not emotionally, I was independent of my parents, who had no money for college tuition. With savings from my after-school job, and with the $3 an hour earned from work study in the chow hall, I would manage. I was on my own. The first friends I made were 3 young men who also worked in the cafeteria. They had chosen North Georgia not because of the military, but because it was close to home, Atlanta, and near the wilderness. Our friendship had nothing to do with romance. Friendship with men was familiar territory since I had brothers, and they treated me like a guy. I got drunk for the first time with them. It was a Saturday night in October, and we had gone to Gainesville, 30 minutes away, the 4 of us, to see a movie. We were drinking Boone's Farm wine, and once the alcohol hit my bloodstream, I was uncontrollably giddy. On the ride home, we stopped for hamburgers at McDonald's. Dahlonega was too small for a fast food restaurant at that time, and I remember standing at the counter so dizzy and drunk I couldn't read the menu board. I found it superbly funny. At that point, my friends did not know what to do with me except take me home, and I did not know what to do with myself except go. Another time, we all went camping on the Appalachian Trail. I carried a cheap cotton sleeping bag that had come in a load of junk, and I was ill prepared for night temperatures in the mountains. I was so ignorant. We built a fire, and I lay as close to it as I could and still nearly froze. A military school is full of rules. Men wear uniforms except after certain hours. Frogs wear them all the time. No public display of affection is allowed. Uniformed cadets must salute outranking officers. When the bugle sounds retreat, everyone must pause until the cannon fires and colors is played. Cadets must salute the flag at midnight on weekdays and 2 a.m. on weekends. The dormitory doors were locked, whether you were in or out. Wanting to be like other girls, I tried cheerleading for an intramural team. I went to Mardi Gras with the band as dumbstruck girl, which meant I picked up the sticks the drummers dropped. I was I inherited many of its members as friends from my sister, whose boyfriend played the tuba. They dressed me in a brown uniform like theirs. Somehow, however, I always wound up with the wild crowd, the liquor drinkers and risk takers. It was what I had to do. One night after dark, I went with a carload of students to night rappel. We drove up into the national forest where a mountain had been blasted away from the highway, leaving a 100-foot cliff that looked high and eerie in the car lights. With flashlights, we unloaded gear and put on extra coats and climbed a faint sloping trail that led up the backside of the mountain to the top. One friend knew what he was doing, although he was the wildest among us, the one whose idea this had been, and the one who owned the gear. He checked the rope and snaps and knots. He knew the trail and the tree to tie to. I did not go off the cliff first. When it was my turn, Hal strapped me to the rope and demonstrated how to brake with a wrist turn on the rope. I backed to the edge and looked down into the darkness. I heard voices and saw the bobbing of a flashlight seeking out the trail back up. The scene was a metaphor for my arrival into the world, the real world, me standing at a cliff's edge, unable even to imagine the route down. Heads up, Hal shouted, and I eased into the void. The rope wanted to sing me down, but I braked breathlessly, bouncing into the cliff wall where shrubs and long grasses had taken root. My knee hit a protruding rock. I let off the brake, but slowly burning the glove leather to avert crashing against the unseen ground. The danger, excitement, the darkness, the thrill, the passing car lights that caught us hanging. This was what I had been missing. The same friend persuaded me to skydive too. He wanted to be my lover, but I was too afraid of him. He was the kind to self-destruct. Still, he was fearless, and no matter what it took, I had to learn fearlessness. The skydiving school was close to Atlanta. A carload of us drove there one Saturday morning. All day we were instructed on how to jump, how to land, and what to do if the parachute didn't open. We signed waiver forms. Then, late afternoon, a plane took us up. One by one, we had to climb out the open door onto an airplane strut. We were jumping static line, which means the chute got open for you. All you hoped was that it had been packed correctly. You fingered the ripcord of the reservoir. The ghost of a cadet was said to roam the men's hall at college. The cadet had been a skydiver so interested in the sport that he purchased his own chute. Not liking how the chute was made, he remodeled it so that the reserve was on his chest and not his belly. One day his main chute malfunctioned, and when he pulled the reserve, which he had sewn by hand, the whole thing ripped away. I crouched in the belly of the plane, watching the ground below, far below. I might not make it back alive to that good earth, yet when my turn came, I crawled to the door and eased out onto the strut, facing forward. Even though the plane was idling through the sky, the wind hit me so hard it flung spittle from my mouth. It pushed my cheeks this way and that. Even then I could have changed my mind, but I had to learn courage. I had to, even if it meant death. If I could do this, I could do anything. I looked back at the instructor. He looked at me, and I nodded. He made a motion and smiled, and I let go, tumbling out and away from the plane. For a few seconds I was flipping slow motion through the heavens, and then I heard a loud snap with an enormous rush of air, and a billow of cloth flowered from my back. Immediately the chute checked my descent, and I looked up. Triangles of red, blue, orange covered me like wings of a beautiful angel. I was safe. Finally, I could fly. It was a magnificent journey back to earth, peaceful, floating above the hubbub of the world. I watched the fields and trees grow beneath me. I landed a quarter of a mile from the jump school. The closer I got to earth, the faster it rose, and I plummeted straight toward a pine. With some frantic tugging of the guides, I managed not to land in its crown. Nonetheless, the tree reached out its arms and caught me. The parachute swept across its lower limbs and snagged enough to soften my fall, but still I landed hard against the ground. Feet, knees, hips, shoulders. I was home. During the spring semester I enrolled in field botany, where I met a mountain woman who smoked, toted a gun, and more or less did as she damn well pleased. We needed 100 inflorescents for our herbariums by the end of the semester, and she and I often collected together. We found wild ginger and Solomon seal and blue cohosh. We explored the national forest and camped in the Cohutta wilderness, roasting temple packets of vegetables over outdoor fires and bathing, head and all, in the creeks. We hiked up her secret waterfall to pee over the edge and body surf naked down the mountain shoals. We loved the same things, poetry and the woods. Aloud across the campfire we read Walt Whitman, and when we described the lives we wanted, our desires were the same: to live simply close to nature, to grow and collect our food, to use plants and medicines, to be self-sufficient as possible. She was older by 10 years, returning to school with a renewed drive to follow her dreams. She was married to a trucker named Dorsey, who made fun of her roots and sticks and torpedoed her feminist ideas, like him helping with the cooking. If I had intended to eat sandwiches all the time, he said, there would have been no point in getting married. The university was made for molecular biology and philosophy, for mathematics and Latin. Those disciplines are useful, but what I needed to learn just as much was life. The first course I scheduled was swimming, where I finally learned to float, to trawl, to backstroke, to sidestroke. I took folklore and astronomy, with night classes in the observatory. I took spring flora. I took writing classes and fiddle lessons. Often my friends and I prowled through the natural food store, learning about whole wheat, herbs, brown rice, kefir, and ginseng. I researched beekeeping, chickens and goats, organic gardening, homesteading in Alaska, the Peace Corps, recycling. I collected maps and bonnet patterns and directions for drying fruit. If a subject couldn't be applied, I wasn't interested. I slept under the stars and ventured out alone to hunt a certain place where Lady Slipper and trailing arbutus were said to bloom. It was as if my spirit had suddenly been let free. Nature was the other world. It claimed me. At the same time, I completed coursework required of me and did well. I studied, I wrote letters to my brothers and parents back home, I returned to Baxley, 6 hours south for holidays and occasional long weekends. I became student chair of cultural affairs at the college, responsible for cultural events, movies on Friday nights in the auditorium, art shows in the gallery, visiting plays. My coup was James Dickey's visit to campus. I wrote and told him we couldn't offer much honorarium, just $7.50, but could I take him into the woods he'd written so much about if he would do a reading? The advisors agreed, despite skepticism. He would come hear a poet. If you pan an additional $250 of those skinny creeks up there, offering me $1,000 in all, he wrote back, which is 1/7 of my usual fee, I will come. I love that area and hope to be buried there. My poem Winter Trout is about trout in Rock Creek. We put notices in newspaper and on radio stations for miles around, all through the isolated mountain communities. We papered the campus and town with flyers and even made table tents for the cafeteria announcing the author of Deliverance, the man who played sheriff, would be speaking. An hour before the reading, the auditorium began to fill, and by 7 it was packed. Over 1,000 people had come to hear James Dickey, poet, read. The next morning some of us picked him up at the motel and drove him into the wilderness. We went to Rock Creek, where he hiked to a footbridge, then built a fire by the water's edge and had a picnic. We drank beer and talked. Dickey carried a pair of binoculars around his neck to look at birds. I'd never seen that. He talked to the locals we met like a starving man, old men and women fishing the creek with corn kernels, and all day he seemed happy. Although I'd read for Thoreau and Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings in high school, that first year away I heard the word environmentalism and first saw it in action. I had just arrived at North Georgia. One dewy morning in early September, outside the biology building, a hand-lettered sign hung from a tree that was threatened with being cut. Woodman, spare that tree, it read, for in my youth it shaded me, and I'll protect it now. I knew George Pope Morris's poem, but in my history I had not heard of a person who took it literally. The idea of caring for a tree for the sake of the tree's sake was so sentimental it was foreign. And the longer I thought about it, the more I admired whoever had lettered those words late at night in a biology lab and tied them furtively under the cover of darkness to a threatened maple. One simple act turned my thinking and made me wish I knew myself better and wasn't gripped with fear when I spoke. What I learned at North Georgia was the direction of my life would go. I also learned that I would never lose the tug of the past on my life. A few years ago, between visits home, a man named Sellers, who lives in the northern part of Appling County, near the river, called my father. "Mr. Frank," he said, "what was your daddy's name?" "Charlie Joe," he replied. "I've got a piece of tree here," said the man, "with C.J. Ray carved in it. The year is 1928. Right above it that is my daddy's initials, and the year is 1918. "I've got it out here," continued the man. "I would have left it growing, but the pulpwooders are coming, and I was afraid they'd get too close to it. If you can cut it in two without hurting my daddy's name, you can have a piece with your daddy's name." My father took the length of hardwood to the high school and rived it with the shop teacher's bandsaw. The length of wood sits in his parlor now, with the fancy chairs and a crash of china figurines, where I kneel to look at it. When my father mentions how long the carving must have taken, I smile. C.J. Ray, 1928, it says. Scars bear testimony to the occupation, to event, but not to circumstances, to phenomena, but not to conditions. They are evidence only, not details. But in which direction was he walking? Where were the soles of his boots intact? Was the knife fresh sharpened? What did he witness? I want to know more than the fact that my grandfather was in the Altamaha floodplain in 1928. Your mama and I decided to do the same thing Daddy told me. I raised my eyebrows. "Carve our initials," he said. And after all 4 children were grown, Mama and Daddy had bought a piece of timberland in Telford County where Grandpa was born. They began to spend time there, driving over Sunday afternoons, planting trees, walking the acreage looking for deer, noticing gopher burrows. Without children to support, some parts of my father had turned back to land. It took Daddy an hour to carve this in a tree, FDR and LAR, 1986. What kind of tree was it? I asked him. He didn't know. Hardwood. Is it easy to find? I asked, thinking I might be able to rescue the memory of them one day from the woods. Scars turn into trinkets you keep, wounds, the herons and pitcher plants heal. Oh yes, he said, close to the road.